Hopefully this video won't be too shitty because I popped a melatonin a little bit ago, so my stream of consciousness might devolve a little bit as as this goes on. So I'll try to keep this as brief as I can. Uh, so I watched the 45-minute first episode of Rise of the Shield Hero or whatever, slash just Shield Hero slash Tate no Yusha if you're feeling freaky, um, and was of a few different opinions about it. I was of several different minds as opposed to just two. And then that conflicted feeling inspired me to read the first, I don't know, 10-ish chapters of the manga adaptation of it, because it's originally a light novel. And I have come to the conclusion upon watching and reading this, technically about a fifth of the series, since I think there's only 50 chapters right now, that there is a lot of incel elements in it, and that sounds kind of vague, and it is kind of vague, and it's obviously open to interpretation, I suppose, but there's a confluence of several different plot elements and thematic stuff going on that leads me to make that conclusion. But first of all, I don't want to say that the series is bad, because, I mean, if I thought that, then I wouldn't have come out of it conflicted. I would have just came out of it thinking it was bad, because there are a lot of really interesting aspects to it. While isekai has become kind of this shitty, generic default kind of thing in anime culture, that's what we perceive it as a genre. I, for one, I do appreciate the subtle differences in the setup of an isekai show, and I kind of was interested in what Shield Hero had going on with having four chosen heroes summoned from an alternate world, and having them all come from alternate dimensions where different shit happened, like historically. That was pretty interesting, although considering the plot setup of it, I don't really think that's going to be explored too much. I also like the setup of an isekai hero who everybody kind of hates and has to build up a reputation from being a social pariah, more or less. So I think that's really interesting. The problem with that, though, is how the condition of his pariah status came to be, which leads into the incel aspects of the show and the stuff that I find questionable, to say the least. So, spoilers, I guess, if you care about being spoiled for the first episode of the anime and the first chapter of the first... Is it the first chapter or two chapters? Chapter-ish of the manga. The thing that sets up the main character's fall from grace, as it were, is a false rape accusation. It's not, subtext or implied at all. That is literally, what happens in it. And, I mean, that whole scenario in and of itself is extremely politically loaded in, the West, or maybe just America more specifically. And I don't know how much of a thing it is in Japan in that way, in being sort of a an anti-progressive talking point or whatever. So that's probably the biggest hole in my analysis of it as such, is that in Japanese culture, it could just be, you know, a random bad event that could happen to someone rather than a politically loaded situation to put in your story. But even so, you know, there are still a few other things. For one, the uh, the woman who falsely accuses the main character of rape attempts to get him drunk, which is, you know, another kind of odd inversion of how these kinds of scenarios occur. Obviously, with rape being portrayed in this way, and that's, you know, that's kind of odd. That woman also slips a detail that seems like, again, so far in what I've seen and read of it, hasn't really come up again, but it's a matriarchal society, apparently. At least that's what, you know, Crunchyroll's subtitles specifically used the word matriarchal, in that no man would turn down a drink offered by a woman because, you know, she offers him a drink. Which really plays into the incel idea that fucking society is heavily in favor of women and that men are treated like shit and stuff like that. So that's what I mean when I say that the confluence of ideas. Because if it was just the main character gets falsely accused of rape, that might be eyebrow raising, but I could just the excuse of it's a different culture, it's not as loaded of a situation. That would probably put an end to that line of thinking. But with that, in addition to the matriarchy thing, makes it a bit more suspect. Also, the fact, and what specifically makes this incel as opposed to misogynist more generally, I guess, is that it turns out that this woman was in league with one of the other heroes that was summoned to this other world. One that is specifically singled out for his handsomeness and for his ability to attract women, a Chad, if you would. And so the Chad and Veronica, to adopt some slang, are conspiring against the relatable otaku main character who everybody else kind of shits on to begin with. He isn't given as much respect or whatever as the other heroes, which, you know, leads to him being singled out as the one to attack for pretty much no reason. Like, that's the other thing about it that makes it fucked upper, is initially it's just presented that she's just this random adventurer woman who steals all his shit and then gets out of, you know, any culpability for stealing his shit by accusing him of rape, which, you know, makes sense on a logical level. But then it's also revealed later that she is the princess of the kingdom that they are, you know, the heroes are fighting monsters in which case, you know, the material justification for her doing this is gone, and it then just, I mean, I think they might be building up to some kind of reason for such a conspiracy taking place, but it's still very odd. And the final detail that leads me to my conclusion is that essentially the arc of the main character, his character arc, is built around him regaining his trust in humanity and that kind of thing by virtue of his party member, uh, confiding in him and supporting him, and him supporting her, and stuff like that. The only issue with that, well, there's a few issues with that, but the main issue with that is that she is his slave, and I think I've seen around. I don't know if I've actually watched them, but I've seen discussion of how slavery is used in isekai shows. It's used very questionably as this, fun. Is It's used in several shows as like a sexy scenario where it's like, whoa, hot babes, and they'll do whatever I want, cool. Um, and again, I understand that Japan doesn't have the same, you know, personal historical experience with slavery as the Western world, or most of the world, honestly, has. But even so, I would say that its inclusion as, you know, even if not a fun thing, more of just like a morally gray thing, um, is concerning, to say the least. And it essentially, the series essentially makes the case that what the main character needs in order to regain his humanity is a submissive woman who, well, she's a girl, really, and the series goes a weirdly large amount out of its way to reassure the main character, or to reassure the audience, rather, that she is a girl, and not not an actual full-grown woman, which makes the situation even more yikes-inducing. Um, and that she is the one that restores his faith in humanity by being nice to him and having faith in him and that kind of thing. So essentially, what the man who has had his life ruined, after the false rape accusation takes place. I guess I should have mentioned this. The entire kingdom more or less finds out about it, and like I said, he's made into a pariah. The king fucking hates him, and it's possible that he was actually in on this conspiracy to fuck over the main character. The people of the kingdom, on the whole, they don't like him because rape is again, directly from the Crunchyroll subs, the worst crime possible, and that even attempted rape or sexual assault is punishable by death. And that the only reason he isn't killed is because he's, a legendary hero or whatever. So yeah, obviously, fucked up power dynamic of slave and master, with this confluence of the main character's arc as a character, is questionable, as I've said several times in this video. Questionable, to say the least. Especially in the manga a little bit. She basically is freed from slavery by the king and the aforementioned Chad and Stacy, and then once like the main character and the Chad duel for the slave girl's right to be free or not, and of course the main character is dueling to keep her as his slave. He loses, and then they remove the in this show, or in the series, they have, like, they put curses on slaves to make them obey and stuff, otherwise, like, it hurts or whatever. They remove the curse seal from her, and then she willingly gets it put back on herself. Like, they don't even continue their relationship, just not as slave and master. She literally willingly gets the curse mark put back on her after it's been removed, which, like, just like, what the fuck? That's fucked up. So yeah, I can feel the melatonin start to kick in. So I should probably cut it off there, lest my train of thought start to degenerate further. Um, so yeah, that's my thoughts on the show. Um, Again, people can have different interpretations, I guess, but I don't. Like I said, that the presence of all of these elements together, and also early in the series as well, pretty much all at once, um, can really only lead me to make this conclusion. Not that I think that the author is like a part of the incel community or anything like that, in any kind of like concrete way, but rather that the story supports the incel worldview, whether intentionally or not. Um, Although apparently it's actually pretty old, so predating incel as more of like a social movement, I guess. I don't actually know about that. But irregardless, an incel person could very much identify with a lot of this story, I feel. Um, so yeah, that's it. If you have anything, whatever, tell me in the comments. You know, no, I shouldn't go into that. I was just gonna say that people say to put stuff in the comments to add video traffic, and I only ever do. I realize when I do that, it sounds like I'm trying to have that kind of thing, but I only ever say ask people to write stuff in the comments when I'm actually interested in seeing other points of view. So don't worry, I'm not a corporate shill. I'm the cool guy. I don't even care about YouTube ad revenue or whatever. Okay? I don't even care.